sophisticated than the kind of policies we've seen out of this government so far if we are to have the kind of economic development we need. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the first reading of the Commerce, Cartel and Other Matters Amendment Bill. Mr Speaker, I think this bill is critical to New Zealand's economy. This bill seeks to amend the Commerce Act to introduce criminal sections for individuals and companies who get involved in such cartels. I commend this bill to the House.
Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First on the Commerce, Cartels and Other Matters Amendment Bill. New Zealand First will be supporting this bill through the House. However, we still do have some concerns, like the previous bill that was discussed tonight, about some aspects of it. Mr Speaker, I personally can recall over the last few decades how New Zealand has been subjected to influences of what could have been termed cartels. From my experience in the shipping and meat industry over many, many years, we certainly were subject to price fixing by international shipping lines serving this country. Being an island state and dependent on our exports of meat and foodstuffs, it certainly was disappointing to see that occurring over many, many years. And the cost of shipping containers 20 years ago were absolutely horrendous. For a period of time I worked for an independent shipping line, ABC Container Line, which challenged the conference, challenged the cartel and brought independent, cheaper freight rates, particularly for wool, to New Zealand. And as a result, the returns to New Zealand wool growers, returns to the wool board and returns to sheep farmers in New Zealand increased considerably because the cost of freight to Europe and other markets was lessened. Likewise, during my time in the air cargo business, I certainly was witness to the fact that there was a great deal of price fixing on the part of airlines, and in fact it was very difficult to get New Zealand cargo into many markets without having to take a fixed price on the freight rate, because there simply wasn't much choice over many, many years. But Mr Speaker, we're asked often in this country this very day, do we still have cartels in this country and is there price fixing? And one has to ask the question really when we continue to see the price of petrol being adjusted by the major four companies, basically following each other within minutes or hours of another moving their prices. And you do wonder, Mr Speaker, how much independence there is in the price of petrol in this country when so much of it is basically when you drive down a road you see the same prices on every consecutive petrol station. Likewise, Mr Speaker, when you go into the supermarkets and see the bottles of milk there, and from one major chain to the next major chain, and they are of the identical price, you do start to wonder, Mr Speaker, how much independence there is there and whether there is true competition in our milk pricing. Similarly, New Zealand is one of the most expensive countries in the world for telecommunications, and our mobile phones are extremely expensive. And again, you do wonder how much competition is out there. Is it genuine competition, or is it just working the system to ensure that the consumers of New Zealand pay as much as they can take out of them? And likewise, as was mentioned by the Green Party tonight, you do wonder similarly about the banking system, where again many of our bank rates, many of our bank charges are so similar, particularly coming out of the Australian banks, that you do wonder how much is wink wink, nudge nudge, and let's just get on with it. So there's a lot there on the table, and certainly I hope, and the New Zealand First hopes, that the Commerce, Cartels and Other Matters Amendment Bill will address some of these issues. At the same time, Mr Speaker, we would hope that this bill addresses situations where there could be called rigging of bids or fixing of bids. And one does have to ask whether this sort of situation is occurring in New Zealand as well. And we're not saying it is, and we're not pointing any fingers, but one does wonder whether this government, in dismissing 3 or 4 bids for the National Convention Centre, in favour of only one bidder, you do start to wonder whether in this country whether there is price fixing or there is a wink wink nudge nudge from the government. The same government that chose to have its conference this last weekend at that same Sky City Convention Centre, had its victory party for the election at that same convention centre, had its campaign launch last year at that same convention centre, and gave that convention centre another 500 pokey machines, or was going to. So you do wonder whether within this situation, Mr Speaker, and where this bill refers to price fixing or rigging of bids and being pro-competitive, you do hope that the same rules will apply to the government as well. We also see, Mr Speaker, in Christchurch, and again where there's a huge amount of work being done in Christchurch, but again questions being asked as to whether the one preferred contractor of EQC and the government is in fact providing a competitive situation. This week, where they have reduced the rates of pay by $6 per hour, and the labourers and workers have simply had to take that pay cut or leave it, lump it or leave it, and they are the only government-appointed contractor, it does again wonder within this country whether there is price fixing and arrangements going on which are not necessarily competitive, which are actually anti-competitive. Mr Speaker, in closing, I would note at the front of this bill the following paragraph, and I would like to read this out because I think it's very, very pertinent, and people out there perhaps listening to Parliament should be aware of it. But it says, on the front of this bill, as noted by the OECD in 2003, the pernicious effects of cartels on economic efficiency are wide-reaching. By raising prices above the competitive level and decreasing output, cartels have the effect of making consumers either pay a higher price for the product or forgo the product entirely. The consumer is therefore an unknowing participant in the illegitimate transfer of wealth to the cartelists. So, Mr Speaker, that's very damning in terms of how this could occur in this country, how it has occurred in the past, how we would want to stamp this out, and how we don't want to see nudge, nudge, wink, wink deals done by the private sector or the government sector, or indeed the government itself, or indeed the cabinet in this country, to provide a situation where the wink, wink, nudge, nudge deals get done while others are left out in the cold and in an anti-competitive situation. Mr Speaker, New Zealand First will support this bill.
Nikki Kay.
Pleased to speak on this